Hey everybody, it is You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week, my first question comes from Joshua O'Brien, who says, "Hey Steve, what do you think of transhumanism, specifically cyborg technology? Do you think we'll ever get to the level we see in most anime and video games with people running around super strong, super fast, and super smart? Or do you think we'll just stop once we manage to fix things like severed limbs and heart disease and neurological disorders?" Oh, I'm sure we'll stop before we take things too far and destroy ourselves through our own short-sightedness. I mean, after all, we are human beings. I do hope that we at least start with the severed limbs and the heart disease before we move on to, the super strength and super speed and super brain power. And to our credit, it seems like that's what we're doing. All of the news I've heard in the last few years about breakthroughs in technology to biology interfaces has been from the medical research field. Prosthetic robotic arms that you can move with your own thoughts, things like that. Brain controlling computers to enable paraplegics to move a little more, regain some functionality. I mean, so I think we're moving in a very positive direction with that sort of thing. I mean, could it easily turn into some horror show? Yeah, I think maybe it could. Could we start using it for purely personal gain? Could people use it to augment abilities they already have just to make them superior to other people? Yeah, I guess it could go that direction. I hope it doesn't. But I guess the door is open for that. Maybe it's something we need to look at once we get to a level of technology where it seems like those things are a realistic possibility. Maybe it's something we need to look at regulating, to make it more difficult for an eccentric billionaire to cyborg himself up and become an unstoppable killing machine. Maybe we need to look at some legislation to try and prevent that from happening. In principle, I'm not opposed to it. I think of how Carl Sagan in the original Cosmos series described the different levels of expertise of human knowledge by looking at the different ways that we encode information. Like we have cellular information we encoded in our DNA that's like the basic instructions of how to build an organism and what the organism does in order to survive and procreate. And then when we evolved to a point where we needed more than that, we evolved brains that allowed us to learn things and memorize things so we could have acquired skills that would increase our potential. And then when we sort of got to the point where we needed even more than that, we invented books and we invented libraries to store knowledge that we might not be able to keep for quick reference in our brains, but we could have it somewhere else. So if we ever needed it, we could refer to it. And maybe the cyborg thing, the transhumanism thing, is just the next step in that evolutionary path. Who knows? I tend to be optimistic. I try to look at it like that. Bagser1. Dear Steve, myself and a friend of mine had an interesting argument about movie villains. He put forth the idea that a great movie villain needs a backstory that adds depth, motivation, and pathos to the character. Roy from Blade Runner as an example, whereas I feel that a great movie villain can be even more villainous if they are just what they are, no backstory required. The best example I can think of is Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Which idea works best for you? Also, who are your favorite movie villains? Well, if your friend is saying that a good movie villain must have a backstory in order to be a great movie villain, then I think your friend is wrong. I disagree with that. I think there have been great movie villains that have had really complicated, interesting backstories, but there have also been great movie villains that have had no backstories at all, the versions like you're talking about. Two of my favorite recent movie villains are of that type, the Joker from The Dark Knight and Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. They both are basically just as we see them. We're not told anything about their past. There's some suggestions about Chigurh's past a little bit, but nothing specific. We're not told like where he came from or why he is the way he is. And that makes him scarier. He's almost like a fact of life. He's just a force of nature. And the same thing with the Dark Knight version of the Joker. He's just a man from nowhere. Why is he the way he is? Why does he do the things he does? Why does he think the way he thinks? We aren't given any explanation. He's just there. He is inexplicable. And I think that's why that version of the character works so well. You know, I think some villains actually, if you gave them more backstory, if you gave them too much backstory, it would ruin them. And a great example of that is Darth Vader. Darth Vader was that kind of a guy. He was a guy with sort of a dark past. It was only sort of referenced or hinted at. We didn't get a lot of specifics. He had certain connections to our heroic characters, but it wasn't gone too far in depth. And then George Lucas makes 3 prequel movies all about Darth Vader's backstory, and to me it drained all of the life and intrigue and interest out of that character. I couldn't give less of a fuck about Darth Vader at this point because his backstory ruined him. So some villains, I think, work much better without a backstory. Alice Svensson. Hi, Steve. In your video, Answers to 10 Questions for Every Atheist, you answer the question of what happens when we die with I don't know. We do know, roughly, the chemical processes that makes us conscious, and we know that those processes stop when we die. When skeptics answer this question in this way, they are privileging the idea of an afterlife. Do you disagree? No, I suppose I don't disagree. That wasn't my intention. And I think your question brings up an interesting point. I didn't intend to leave the door open for an afterlife. I didn't mean to say I don't know as in I don't know, maybe there is a heaven. I don't think there is. And I think the rest of my answer makes it clear that that's my position. My position is that I don't think anything happens after we die. I think we die and we cease to exist as people. That's what I expect to happen to me when I die. That's what I assume happens to other people when they die. But the ultimate answer is I don't really know. But you bring up an interesting point, and your full unedited question, you make the analogy of we don't know absolutely what matter is made of, I think was the example you used. But if someone were to ask what is matter made out of, we probably wouldn't answer we don't know. We would probably explain what we do know to the best of our knowledge. And we might add a caveat that we're not 100% certain about everything, but we're pretty sure. So I think it's a fair point. I think my answer should have been I don't think anything happens when we die. And maybe I should have added a caveat that we're not 100% certain what happens, if anything, when we die. But the only really reasonable answer is that nothing happens, that we disappear as people, that we cease to exist. I think that would have been a better answer. So I think you raise a valid point. Marv Roberts. Steve, what are your thoughts on Jessica Valenti's recent article in The Guardian in which she proposed paying men less and paying women more in order to fix the wage gap? In principle, I am not in favor of achieving gender equality or any kind of equality by taking things away from the privileged group. I think it's better for everybody if we raise up the underprivileged group rather than pull down the privileged group. But the proposal in Jessica Valenti's article, which you linked, was to sort of do both at once, to lift women up and pull men down a little bit to sort of accelerate the process, just in terms of pay, in terms of the wage gap. And the way it's described and the specific examples used in that article, it doesn't sound like that radical of a proposal. I still would prefer to correct the imbalance by adding to women as opposed to subtracting from men. And I think it's possible to do that. I'm one of those Pollyannas that she mentions in the article who thinks that it's not a zero-sum game, and that we can add to one without taking from the other. But in the specific example she cites, like at the New York Times, where you're talking about someone who is in a supervisory position and who is dealing with a very specific, limited budget, and she has the goal of addressing the wage gap in terms of gender and saying, okay, I need to pay women more. Where am I going to get that money from? You know, she has a limited, finite budget. Okay, well, maybe if I take some from the men and I transfer it over to the women, I give them a little less and give the women a little more. That's how we can get that equality. It's not my ideal perfect solution, but the way it's described in that article, I don't have a huge problem with it. Jason, hey Steve, ever been attracted to a man intellectually or physically? Fictional characters count as well. Let the rumors about us begin here. Are there not rumors about us already? I mean, are we doing something wrong? Do we need to turn it up a notch? Is that what you're saying? I was under the impression there were rumors. I don't know if I've ever I mean, I've made jokes a lot about being attracted to, like Ben Affleck, for instance. I don't know if I've ever been like really, like honestly, physically attracted to a man, like the same way I would be physically attracted to a woman. But intellectually attracted, sure. And I mean, I guess I don't know if attracted in terms of like maybe magnetism or wanting to be in that person's circle. Wanting that person to think I was cool or to approve of what I did. Yeah, yeah, that's happened. Sure, of course it has. And in terms of fictional characters, I mean, forget about it. Shit, who wouldn't want to be like Captain Kirk's friend, or maybe more? You know what I'm saying? You know what? If me and Captain Kirk ever start hanging out, Jason, I could get you in. I could, we could maybe put something together there. And I trust the same would be true for me if you were in that situation. Jen Virtue, hi Steve. In the years that I was in church, I would notice those I'm blessed kind of Christians. What do I mean? Those kind of Christians who seem to thrive in their religiosity. They seem to live in this religious bubble where every waking moment is God, 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 Jesus, Jesus, and God again. As I look back on my own walk with God, I was never that obnoxious with my faith. Why do you think some Christians thrive in their religion and other Christians don't? Well, I think a lot of it depends on where you are in life in general. In your full unedited question, you mentioned how, the really super religious Christians, the God, God, God types, oh, I'm so blessed, were ones who maybe were successful in life and they attributed all of their successes to their religion or their godliness, and like everything just sort of reinforced that they were doing it right, that they were on the right track. Whereas maybe someone who is in a less fortunate lot in life, who suffers a little more, who's maybe in a lower economic class or faces more hardship, they might not be as gung-ho about the whole God thing. They might think, yeah, I go to church every Sunday and God's not exactly paying a whole lot of attention to me. Like, what's going on? That could have something to do with it. I think also, I think there's a difference between people who go to church out of a sense of obligation or a sense of habit or a sense of guilt and the true believers. I think there are a lot of people who are really true believers who, if they have doubt, they don't spend a whole lot of time on it. They really honestly believe that God loves them, that Jesus died for them, that Christianity is this wonderful, beautiful thing, and that when they live their lives according to what they think God wants them to do, that they are rewarded and they are blessed. And I think there are people like you and me and lots of other people who never quite bought that. Even if we said we did, even if we tried to, even if we made an effort to believe, we always had more doubt than we had faith. I think there are people who just don't buy into it, who aren't true believers. And then I think there are people who are. The Crusty Cunty Tuna Cave, aka Vagina. Hey Steve, I've been dating a girl for about 4 weeks and she's perfect in every way, but then one day she told me that she was born a man. After that I stopped dating her. 1. Am I transphobic in your opinion? 2. Since you said in a You Had to Ask that you think they should be identified with how they feel and not to how they were born anatomically, would you date a transgender? Why or why not? 3. Also, even though I think they should refer to themselves to the gender they want, I also feel it's best to inform the person they are dating in the beginning about what they were born as and not say it when things are serious. What do you think? I don't think you're transphobic in the sense that we usually say that we usually mean that word. But practically speaking, I guess you kind of are. But at the same time, I think you had an expectation. You have a certain preference, and when reality defied that expectation, it defied your preference, you realized that what you thought you had was not what you had. And I don't know if I should necessarily blame you all that much for that. I don't think it's out of hatred. I don't think it's out of any sort of vindictiveness on your part. I think things just weren't the way you assumed that they were. As for whether or not I would date a transgender person, I don't know. I would like to think that I would. I've never been in that situation. I've never had to face that moment where, I was going out with someone who I assumed was, let's say, born a woman, anatomically a woman, and then it turned out she was a trans woman. I've never been in that situation. I would like to think that it wouldn't matter to me. Pre-op or post-op or whatever. I would like to think that of myself. That's my that's my vision of myself. That's my ideal self, that I would not care, that it would not make any difference to me at all. I don't know if that's how it would be or not, because I've never been in that situation, but I would hope that it would not make a difference. And I think when we as people progress to the point where it really doesn't make a difference, we will be all the better for it as individuals and as a society. I think we need to get to the point where it really doesn't make a difference. Bruce Bartup, Steve, if you had, say, 10,000 words to write in your life, how would you approach the problem? It's kind of my real problem. Parkinson's disease, blah, blah. Do you save some for a tear-jerking deathbed speech, or risk a few on some fun for everyone early in the game? Are words like treasure or like manure? Do they need to be kept safe or spread around, helping young things to grow? In your analogy, I would tend to lean more toward the manure side. I would say if your words, and it depends on the words and it depends on what you're saying, but if you see your words as a treasure, then that's all the more reason why they should be spread around to as many people as possible. You know, if I only had a limited amount of time or a limited amount of words to say things, I would want to spend as little time as possible worrying about dividing them up and putting them over here. Okay, I need to save some for this and I need to save some for that. I think that would end up distracting me from what is most important, which is communicating my thoughts and my feelings and what's important to me to the people that are important to me, and talking about the things that are important to me and saying the things I need to say. That's what I would worry about the most. So I guess treat the words like manure, but treasured manure. Luke Roar Games. Steve, I'm a 15-year-old guy, and this spring I came out as bisexual to myself and my friends. It's been 7 or 8 months since I came out of denial, but now I feel my attractions to those of the opposite sex dwindling. I don't really know what to do. I'm stuck where I was in the spring, but instead of trying to figure out if I'm straight or bi, it's now between bi and gay. I know that you most likely have no experience with this subject matter, but I could really use some advice on how you think I could figure myself out. Thanks. I would say just do what you did before. You said that before, in the spring, you were struggling with whether or not you were straight or bi. You figured that out. You decided you were bi. Now you are struggling between bi or gay. You figured it out last time. I trust that you'll figure it out this time. And whatever the answer turns out to be, whatever you decide that you are, for now, at 15, who knows how that will change, is going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I mean, whatever you decide you are, whoever you decide you're attracted to, whatever your orientation is, as long as it's honestly who you are yourself, it'll be fine. You figured it out before, you'll figure it out again. Don't worry about it. Just worry on figuring out who you are. And you're a teenager, you might not figure it out for years yet. And if it takes a while, don't worry. That's what adolescence is for. God damn it, I sound old when I say that. I sound so old when I talk to you like that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk to you like I'm like your grandfather or some sage old, wizened priest or something. But I that's what I remember my adolescence as, an extended period of figuring out who the fuck I was. So I think that's what you'll do. Dr. Themo. Dr. Matt Taylor, part of the team behind the pioneering Rosetta mission, has apologized for wearing a bowling shirt featuring images of women wearing bondage gear and wielding guns. Quote taken from the Independent UK website. What do you think of this news? Was the criticism he faced for that shirt warranted, or is it an overreaction? I think the criticism was warranted, and I think it was an overreaction. I see both sides of this. I'm glad that he apologized, and yet at the same time, I feel bad for him. I saw that, he was really, emotionally, he really felt bad about it. He really didn't think that people would be offended by it. He really was grieved over the reaction to the shirt. But at the same time, I'm glad that he apologized. I wish that someone had come up to him that day and said, dude, change your shirt. I wish someone had come up to him and said, before the cameras get here, before you're on TV around the world, this is the biggest day of your life. You're about to accomplish something that mankind has never done before. You're a part of a team that is about to land a spacecraft on a comet. change your shirt. I wish somebody had said that. And I know the shirt was like a gift, and they probably had sentimental value to him, and the person who gave it to him was a woman. And I know I'm up on all the facts. It doesn't make a difference. The criticism of the shirt, I think, is something that I can sympathize with. If I were a woman, and especially if I were a woman and I were interested in the gender gap in STEM fields, and I were concerned and worried about the lack of women going into engineering and science careers, and I was watching the coverage of this incredible feat, this amazing scientific accomplishment, and I saw one of the guys involved in it wearing that shirt, I might be pissed off too. You know, I completely get why people were upset by it. I can understand a woman or anyone, really anyone, seeing that shirt and going, oh God, like, why the fuck does he have to have that shirt on? I get it. I get it. I think it's a shame that he has now been reduced to the guy who wore that shirt. I mean, I sympathize with him because he was part of the team that accomplished this amazing, amazing thing. I mean, for Christ's sake, we landed a spaceship on a comet. Like, and that's what I would much rather talk about that than talk about what the guy had on his shirt. And I'm sure he would too. I think that's a much bigger deal. But I think the outrage was too much. I think reducing him to the guy in the shirt was unfair to him. But the underlying objections to the shirt, I think, are valid, and I share them. And I sympathize. I just think it was a little too much. I think it might have been better, and I know the internet is terrible at this, but it might have been better to have a more measured, reasonable response. You know, people who pretended as though the shirt should overshadow the scientific accomplishment, I don't really get that. I can't side with that. But the underlying objections to the shirt I get, and I think are valid, and I think are, you know, they represent problems in the STEM field and problems with female representation and gender inequality in general that I think are valid and worth talking about. I just think the reaction to the shirt itself was an overreaction. You know, I would much rather talk about the ship landing on a comet. You know, I mean, to me, that's like, I watched that, and I wasn't even thinking about the guy's shirt when I was watching it. I was watching it, and I was just sitting there thunderstruck. See how calculating I am? You see how cynical I am? I was thinking about that all the way through that answer. Does it make me creative, or does it make me a liar? I don't know. I tell you what it makes me. It makes me a guy who is about to answer questions in
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Dangerously talented. Which movies would you have walked out on had you not had the sense of commitment that prevented you from walking out on them? Never Back Down was one that I walked out on, and pointedly so, and I would have walked out on Bagger Vance if I was not watching it on a plane. The closest I've ever come to actually walking out on a movie was Gods and Generals, because it was so long. It actually had an intermission, and I had I had sort of a come to Jesus moment in the restroom during that intermission where I was like, am I really going to go back in this theater and watch the rest of this fucking horrible movie? And I did. ZJ Donnan, if you could only watch movies from one country excluding America, which one would it be? My choice is South Korea. Oh man, that is tough. What a great question. For me, it would be either Japan or France. There's such awesome cinema from both of those countries. I mean, with Japan, you've got Otsu, you've got Kurosawa, you've got all the more modern cinema, the great Japanese horror stuff that's been coming out in the last 15 or 20 years. With France, you've got the French New Wave directors, which are, you know, some of my favorite directors, and you've got, you know, Jacques Tati, and I don't know. If I had to pick, maybe France, but ooh, it would be tough. Der Wunderbar Bar. A few years back, Tim Burton had a movie script for a Superman movie called Superman Lives, where the movie fell through. But before it fell through, it had gotten so far that casting of Superman had been done. Nick Cage had been given the part. My question is thus: if you were to make that movie, who would you cast as Lex Luthor? I always thought Ed Harris would be a great Lex Luthor. I would cast Ed Harris as Lex Luthor if I was making, no matter what Superman movie I was making. I think Ed Harris, even today, He's a bit aged now, but he could still shave that motherfucker's head and make him Lex Luthor. That's what I say. Brad Ballmander. Hi, Steve. Do you eat at McDonald's or are you a liar? I confess, I love me an Egg McMuffin in the morning. Yeah, I eat at McDonald's. I like, when I get breakfast at McDonald's, I go full bore whole hog and I get the deluxe breakfast platter with hotcakes. And then I take the sausage and the egg and the biscuit and I make my own little sausage biscuit. Yeah, I eat at McDonald's, yes. Sam. Hey, Steve, I want to know your stance on these hot button ethical issues. Abortion. I'm for legalized abortion. Euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide. I also think that should be legal. The death penalty. Not for the death penalty. I think the death penalty should be illegal. And animal rights. Yes, I believe in animal rights. I'm not a radical animal rights activist. I'm not someone who thinks that we shouldn't be allowed to have pets or anything. But I have a zero tolerance policy for cruelty to animals. If you're for or against some of these things, could you please explain why? No, because it's the lightning round. I gotcha, Sam. Radical Bacon. So, Steve, do you sleep with your stuffed animals? Do they spend most of their time in your bedroom, or do they live elsewhere? Personal question. Radical Bacon. Personal question. They live on the bed. Austin Runge. Hey, Steve, have you seen Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler? If so, did you like it? I'm only curious because you're a big wrestling fan and a fan of Aronofsky's movies. Yeah, and for both of those reasons, I thought The Wrestler was awesome. I loved that movie. I wouldn't say it's Aronofsky's best movie, but it's a really good movie, and it's definitely the best fiction film ever made about pro wrestling. I mean, pickings are kind of slim there, but nevertheless. The chemistry question. Opinion of Freddie Mercury, best lead singer ever. Ted Appelt. Hey, Steve, what is your opinion on instant runoff voting? I totally support it. I think it should be implemented nationwide as soon as possible. And it probably never will be. Sam Clemens, RIGL. Lightning round question for you, Steve. If you could have a movie made out of any, preferably obscure hero, super or otherwise, ever written, who would it be and why? I would love to see a movie made of the Challengers of the Unknown. I think that would be and they did it like an old school, awesome, just adventure movie, just a pulp adventure movie where all bets are off, and it was, just a very lighthearted, adventurous tone. I think a Challengers of the Unknown movie would be awesome, and I think it could be really good given how people have accepted Guardians of the Galaxy. I think Challengers of the Unknown really could be something. I would love to see that. Well, that's it for the questions. Lightning round is over. Before I get out of here, though, I'm going to do a shout-out. And the shout-out this week goes to Arguing from Ignorance. This is an awesome channel. Some of you may be familiar with this channel already. If not, you should be. There's a video on there about describing ancient Bible texts. That's one of his more recent ones that's really interesting. He has a video about, he talks a lot about atheism and Christianity, religion in general, from a scientific perspective. He has a video called Can We Trust Scientists that examines why people tend to trust scientists but also doubt things that scientists say, particularly in terms of climate change. It's a really interesting video. And it's just a really, really excellent channel. It's got about 8,000 or so subscribers, deserves a hell of a lot more. So check out Arguing from Ignorance. Awesome channel. That's the shout out this week. Well, that's it for me this week. Before I get out of here, though, I want to remind you that I can't do this without you. I need you. I need you to ask me some questions, which you always do. You always ask me more questions than I can use, but I feel like I have to keep reminding you. I have to keep priming the pump so you don't feel like I don't really need the questions, because I totally do. So leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. And I will answer as many of your surely most excellent questions next time. So until next time, take care, everybody.